G'day guys, welcome back to TRT the Podcast. This is our Q&A special where you guys can send in questions and I'm going to do my best to answer them for you. So what is my opinion on liberty training? Yeah, and that's a broad topic, of course. I think what can be confusing in the horse world these days is we have such a broad spectrum of disciplines and types of training methods and different cultures and different purposes and different goals. And sometimes the human condition is to compare those things. And, Equitana is one, for instance, you can go to one end of the trade stands and, they're selling, a double lunge or a long shank bit with a massive port for cutting or reining or whatever it is at one end. And then at the other end, you have neck ropes and bitless bridles and bareback pads. And, everything in between. And so because the culture is so broad and there's so much history and from so many different directions, like cultures in general, horse culture is also very diverse. And I see and presented with new things and ideas and techniques all of the time from places in the world that I didn't even know they had horses. So this is kind of a continuing exploration into worlds we're not even aware of. But of course, the mainstream ones, you often have this sort of comparison between, sport and people riding with saddle and bridle and bits and spurs and people that are riding, doing sort of freedom, liberty. And of course, there's also this connotation with words, freedom, that the horse is really going natural horsemanship. It's in the end a marketing word that we put a certain meaning to it. And you can go through philosophies of how words get meaning and different cultures and epochs and all those sort of things. But, in the end, for me, it doesn't really have a meaning. I know people in one certain culture that ride with gear and bits and bridles and do it in a very nice way, and their horses are extremely happy and live a life of fulfillment. And I know people that are doing very romanticized shows and letting people see that they can do incredibly high, difficult things without anything on the horse, and the horses are completely miserable and in pain and not living the best life. And, also vice versa and everything in between. So I think that's kind of, creating an opinion on liberty, you could only generalize between what my sort of idea of what I label liberty to be. There's also people that are displaying and advertising liberty, which is basically control of the horse without gear. So a high level of control, actually much more discipline, because there is no gear. So the level of dictatorship or pressure not to ever go away with sort of fear techniques, it also happens, but I also work with people that are allowing horses to really have their own opinion and show their own emotion. And those two, again, extremes, spectrums of a small sector of the horse world being liberty because they are working a horse without gear. There's no saddle and bridle and, making it look like liberty, like freedom. They're not sitting on the horse, or maybe they are, but you know what I mean? It's in a liberty sense. You can name it Liberty because when you take a photo, the horse is free and the person standing next to it, or is without gear. But they're doing two totally different things, you know, in a totally different way. And the horse is having a totally different experience. And so for me, it's always going back to the horse's basic needs. What are the horse's basic needs? You know, and there's a whole conversation in that to have the explanation of that. But if you're aware of the horse's basic needs and you're trying to fit their basic needs and you're giving the horse the understanding of how he can self-regulate, that he can be in control of his own physical and mental soundness, that he has all the skills to be able to feel comfortable in all the situations, places and spaces he's going to find himself in the human world in which we put him in, you know, that's sort of, to me, more important than a style of training, you know, or what gear you use, yes or no. I'm not a Liberty expert, so I can also say, you know, a whole list of things that I feel you get a whole lot of advantage from. But I know from my small experience and having colleagues and friends that are working in a Liberty sort of sense or style at a very high level, that there is a certain level of attunement and connection and awareness of how to help the body and how to have a conversation where you are trying to do what ultimately all horsemen should be trying to achieve is to have that feeling of as little input for maximum output. You know, trying to do things with small aids, letting it be subtle, having a level of communication that is beyond touch or a physical aid, feeling, sensation, energy, thought, that you try to reduce that to real minimal vibe, real minimal levels of communication or aids. And so with Liberty, there are major factors of being able to feel that really at a high level. I think also for the horses, there is also a sense of them being themselves really as one, really feeling only the sense of themselves in a physical action of pure expression of oneself, which is also very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do for a human. But if you have somebody that allows the horse to show the pure sense of himself, and he doesn't have anything on him but himself, his skin and his hair, and he doesn't feel one piece of leather on him or anything, he's just himself in his own physical makeup, I think that can be very empowering for a horse. And of course, I've seen a lot of horses that express this in a really pure form when they're able to move in and around without anything on them. But I've also seen horses in a riding sense with saddle, bridle, rider, and a rider also express these things. So it's difficult for me to say, what do you think of Liberty? I think all of these aspects influence us as humans to create an opinion about something. It's easy for us to create an opinion when you categorize it, when you give it a name, when you give it a label. But everything exists in the gray areas. You know, nothing is like that because we call it that. And I think that's a good way for us to reflect on ourselves of what are we doing? You know, what are we doing? I'm doing dressage. Well, are you? What is that? And so when we can be really aware of what we're doing is the physical action and our intent, while in the presence of a clear conversation, interaction with our horses, is what we're doing. It's not that we're doing dressage, jumping, Liberty, reining, you know, a human condition. It's not that we are creating happy athletes because we say we are, because a federation says that's what we should be doing. You know, what we're actually doing is the elements that are involved in the conversation with our horses every day that actually don't have a name.